Hey there and welcome back to another Dreamworks video. And today I want to talk a little bit about an old classic. Aardman's Wallace and Gromit, The Curse of the Were-Rabbit, and more specifically, how that particular film is criminally underrated. For those that are not in the know, Wallace and Gromit, The Curse of the Were-Rabbit is a claymation film that parodies classic horror films and monster movies of the 50s and 60s, and follows the characters of Wallace, a cheese-loving genius inventor, and Gromit, his faithful and hyper-intelligent dog, as they strive to succeed in their latest venture as pest control agents for their company, Antipesto. As their town's annual giant vegetable competition draws ever nearer, Wallace and Gromit find themselves under more pressure than ever before to ensure that the competition remains safe from the absurd horde of bunnies that live on the estate of Tottington Hall, the home of Lady Tottington, Wallace's latest lady love, which is also playing host to the giant vegetable competition. So Wallace, being an absolute lunatic, decides that the best way to prevent the rabbits from attacking the competition and ruining the town's tradition is a little bit of healthy brain alteration. So he creates a brainwashing machine, which is enhanced by lunar panels to try and make rabbits hate vegetables. Obviously, everything goes wrong, however, and he and the rabbit do a brain switch. And we end up with a veggie-obsessed Wallace who turns into a giant rabbit at night, and a human-sized rabbit who's obsessed with cheese and spouts off all of Wallace's best lines and catchphrases, even if they don't make sense in the moment. I mean, just based on that plot, it sounds like a good time to me. And I think the world for the most part agreed, because this thing did very, very well from a critical point of view. I mean, let's take a look at its reception. For starters, this bad boy got a tasty 95% on Rotten Tomatoes with an average rating of 8.1 out of 10 and a Metacritic score of 87 out of 100. So already those are some very decent scores and indicate to me that at the very least people seem to enjoy the film when they went to see it. But wait, there's more. Because not only did it do well from the perspective of critics and audience reviews, but it also managed to garner a lot of nominations and wins come awards season, winning the Best Animated Feature at the Oscars and winning a handful of Annie Awards, and then also winning the Best British Film Award at the BAFTAs. So that's a very good haul if you ask me. And yet, despite this acclaim, I still think that this film's completely and utterly underrated. And you might scoff at that considering the stats I've just read out to you, but it's true. Because despite all of this acclaim at the time, since its release, I feel like it's hardly ever cropped up. When people talk about their favourite animated films, or just the best animated films of all time, or the best Dreamworks affiliated films of all time even with that hugely narrowed scope, I feel like it hardly ever turns up in these discussions. Yeah, it'll make its token appearance on lists like Top 1000 British Films, or Top 250 Animated Films Made Since 1950, or whatever, those things. Those sort of lists that websites and magazines make to get people interested, whilst also pissing off as few people as possible, by ensuring that every major release ever appears on their list. So simply put, despite its critical success, it feels like it's gone completely under the radar. Hell, I feel like even the actual Wallace and Gromit shorts seem to be discussed with higher frequency. And they're from the same franchise, so you'd expect that this would mean the film would crop up more often, but I digress. And so honestly, I've been racking my brain trying to figure out why the hell this film seems to have fallen so deep into obscurity. For God's sake, it was released by one of the biggest animation studios in the world, but yet it feels like it's being treated like some obscure indie flick. And so, after a bit of thought and research, I have come up with some potential reasons as to why it might be considered obscure. And we'll start with box office earnings. Across all markets, Wallace and Gromit Curse of the Were-Rabbit grossed around $192 million. And I'll be honest, whilst that's still a good gross off a budget of $30 million, it's still pretty goddamn disappointing, and looking into it, it looks like this film actually lost money for Dreamworks. Guess those hidden unofficial costs added up for this film? But anyway, the film didn't do too well financially. So that means people didn't buy tickets and thus didn't bother seeing the film. So whilst the people that did see it for the most part thought it was great, it was a much smaller pool of people than many other animated films have access to. And this was especially prevalent in the USA, where the film underperformed big time from what it was expected to, with the international market being forced to pick up the slack. But obviously, since the US is the biggest and most lucrative market for English language films, it didn't end up turning out too well for poor old Wallace and Gromit. But why is this the case? Why the hell did it fail financially and thus not really make an impact that it deserved to based on its overall quality? And well, I think we can sort of hone in on two major reasons that may contribute to the lesser status that this film seems to grapple with. And the first of these reasons is that it is completely and utterly English. And don't get me wrong, I'm not bashing the film for staying true to the franchise to which it belongs. But I think it's a simple fact. It is very, very British in tone. The way the characters speak, the references that are made, the lifestyles they lead, the architecture, the slang, everything is specifically tailor-made to bring to life this mid-50s town in which the dynamic duo live. Huge elements of the story kind of rely on this inbuilt connection. Many movies can succeed in bridging that divide into the US, but if something's very, very specific to a particular country, I feel like it tends to lack the ability to penetrate the US market like a more general film or TV show would be able to. So, whilst the film was able to do well internationally, specifically the UK or other Commonwealth countries that have the same cultural connection that manifests in a much stronger way, the USA doesn't have that anymore. They cast aside that connection a long time ago, as they love to say. And so that means things usually need to be a lot more general, because ultimately there are shit tons of American films that they can already relate to more easily. So why would they bother with something that seems like they wouldn't understand it? Once again, this isn't a criticism of either the film or the US for that matter, but more an observation. And I think the second main reason simply works down to its visual style, its animation style. It's claymation, stop motion. It's not a traditional 2D drawn animation, nor the new age 3D, but claymation. And once again, it's not a criticism of this, but just an observation. Claymations never do as well as other mediums, and honestly, I don't really understand why. Maybe it's the fact that it feels inherently old and retro or cheap, I don't know. Perhaps people think it looks creepy, or that it's solely for kids and parents won't enjoy it. I don't know the reason. But I do know the DreamWorks claymation works with Aardman were not financially lucrative. They're their worst performing films. And this indicates to me that people didn't want to come and see it. And I mean, Chicken Run, one of DreamWorks Aardman team-ups and one of its lesser films at the box office, is actually the highest grossing stop motion film ever, with a gross of about 200 and something million. Compare that to the billion-dollar hauls the highest grossing 3D animations get. The difference is truly astronomical. And it's pretty clear to me now why these films have faded into obscurity. So really, that's all I have to say. Wallace and Gromit does deserve better. It deserves more money, and it deserves more recognition. And I'm very thankful that they're going forward with making another film after all this time. And hopefully this time they can get a bit more recognition with the rise of on-demand streaming services. Hopefully more people can get invested with it. But I guess we'll have to wait and see. And anyway, those have just been my opinions. And now I'd like to hear yours. What do you think of Wallace and Gromit: The Curse of the Were-Rabbit? Do you think it's underrated? Or do you think it sits firmly where it belongs? I'm curious for your thoughts, so make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and let me know.